listening to Haunted Moments, and I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Theresa F. Koch. Angels, heavenly angels, often referred to as guardian angels, are mentioned numerous times in the scriptures. Therein, we learn that angels are spiritual beings created by God to serve Him, and sent by God to watch over the whole human race, to deliver His message, to guard and protect us from danger, and to do battle with other spiritual beings on our behalf. Since the beginning of time, angels have delivered God's messages to mankind. Here are just a few tales from around the globe. And an Israeli colonel had taken a unit of 20 Israeli soldiers into the midst of one of Lebanon's border cities where the fighting was fierce. He led his men into a courtyard that was walled up around, believing it would provide a place of cover and rest from their enemy fire. Suddenly, someone tossed a hand grenade out of one of the windows above them. As it hit the ground, the colonel threw his body over the hand grenade and cried out, "Hear, O Israel! The Lord our God, the Lord is one." As he shouted the last words, he would never speak in the holiest of prayers. He honored his God. The grenade blew up, killing him, but sparing all of his soldiers from death. Some were slightly injured from shrapnel, but none had life-threatening wounds because of the colonel's action. The colonel called upon the living God and gave him glory seconds before he died, saving his comrades. God showed up immediately and sent one of his messengers to reveal that he was there with them. Steve states the following: "When I was a teenager and an apprentice mechanic near Manchester, England, I loved to drive my car all over different parts of the country. One week it was my intention to set off on Friday night and go to Cornwall for the weekend. When I mentioned this to the apprentice I was working with, he asked me if he could come with me. He also asked if we would stop at his aunt's house in Margate on the way. At the time, I didn't realize that it was several hundred miles in the other direction, so I agreed. We traveled through Friday night, and about 2 hours of sleeping in the car, we were somewhere near Kent, then spent Saturday morning at his aunt's house. Then we were undecided on whether we should take the hovercraft and go to France for the day or carry on to Cornwall. We chose Cornwall and set off after lunch. Late on Saturday night, somewhere near Stonehenge, we grabbed another couple of hours' sleep in the car and ended up at the South Cornish coast at about 10 a.m. Sunday morning. We didn't stay long as I was very tired. On the way back several hours later, we were on the M6 near Birmingham, about 80 miles from home, and I was struggling to stay awake. Just 80 miles to go, then I saw a nun on the hard shoulder walking northwards. There were no turnoffs for miles, no service areas for over 20 miles in either direction, or any sign of a broken down vehicle. All the way home, all I could think about was solving the mystery. Upon reaching home, I calculated the mileage covered that weekend as 1,165 miles. For 25 years, I kept coming back to this puzzle and trying to work it out until one day recently, I related it to a good friend of mine who was very spiritual. He was with his pastor at the time, and they both said it must have been an angel sent to keep me awake. My friend and his pastor call this kind of event a good incident, a godly incident. With 80 miles to go, God had sent an angel. At that moment, I received a message from heaven. I felt something so strong inside, both spiritually and physically, and I just absolutely know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they solved the puzzle for me. I have never once again wondered about that nun walking along the side of the motorway. She was my 80 miles to go guardian angel. Jan, a wonderful man of God from South Africa, is one of the tens of thousands of volunteers who have shown Jesus using either 16mm or on video. Jan had taken a most risky step. He was about to show Jesus to a small group of hardened criminals in a maximum security prison in South Africa. He was alone in a room with the toughest of tough, robbers, rapists, and murderers. Several of them were lifers. Jan knew that any one of the prisoners could easily slit his throat with a knife when he dimmed the lights to show his film of Jesus. However, despite the pressure he felt, Jan was obedient. As the story unfolded, many of the prisoners mocked and swore at the screen. Their language was foul and offensive. Gradually they quieted down and became more interested in the story. Then an astonishing thing happened. During the crucifixion several began to weep. By the time the prayer of invitation was completed, hardened criminals, every one of them, were on their knees sobbing, asking God to forgive them, praying to invite Christ into their lives. Shocked and amazed, Jan wasn't sure what had just happened to him. He turned his head to the corner of the room, startled by the sight. Standing before him was an awesome being, 10 feet tall, robed in brilliant white, an angel. Jan said the angel's face was obscured. He could see nothing above the angel's shoulders. This messenger of God lifted up his hand and pointed a finger directly towards Jan. You see, Jan, all you must do is be available and do the work. Instantly the angel vanished, but not the sense of awe that was engulfing Jan. He had seen the living God at work, pouring out his love upon those of whom he died to save, and he had witnessed the greatest miracle of all. He had seen vilest of sinners being born from above, becoming righteous in Jesus. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised, and his greatness is unsearchable. Psalms 145:3. I personally was healed myself by an angel. If you believe, it is up to you, but I can tell you that I believe. You've been listening to Haunted Moments, and I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Theresa F. Koch.